It's recording now.
Hey Venkat, can you hear me also?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hi everyone. I'll do a small introduction of our speaker and archives at NCBS. Good evening. Hi, welcome to today's Researcher Talk. Thank you for joining us here. For those who may be visiting us for the first time, I don't think anyone is. But yes, Archives at NCBS is a public collecting center for the history of science in contemporary India. The archives has four verticals, one of which is research, and research fellowship is a core element of that. And it is my distinct pleasure to introduce to you Taksh, who is a project associate at the Archives at NCBS. He's working with Dr. Samira Sheikh, who is the fifth Obaid Siddiqi Chair in the History and Culture of Science at NCBS. And he's working on understanding early modern maps of India. Prior to this, he worked as an archivist. His other interests, or in his past life, he was interested in ecology and natural history. So his talk today is titled Following in Surajmal Footsteps. The presentation features unfolding methodologies for interpreting an important 17th century map of Gujarat and Rajasthan found in the City Palace Museum, Jaipur. At first sight, such maps may seem hard to follow, but as the talk will show, GIS-based analysis as well as historical research can help unlock the secrets of Indian maps and shed light on why and how they were created. Please join me in welcoming Taksh.
Thank you, Parvati. So today I will be talking about some of the work. So I work with Dr. Samira Sheikh here, and for her time in NCBS, she's looking at early modern maps in India. So early modern is from around 16th to the 18th century. And so today the idea is to take all of you through the kind of work we do, and I'll try to do that through one of the maps that we're looking at. So early modern India, there's a lot of maps that have been made in early modern India. Some of these are colonial maps, for instance, a Portuguese map on the right here, and then this is a British map in the center. This is Renel's map of India. And then you also have globes from the Mughal period. This is a globe from a painting of Jahangir with Shah Abbas, and he is standing on the globe with Shah Abbas. So there are both colonial and indigenous maps from the early modern period in India. And indigenous here, of course, it doesn't mean that there was no influence from these colonial groups, but as far as we know, the predominant methodologies and the minds behind these maps were Indians. And For my work, I want to look at Western India. I want to focus on the early modern maps of Western India. So that would mean the modern states of Rajasthan and Gujarat. And to answer why Western India, one is because I myself am from Rajasthan, although I haven't spent a lot of my life there, like significant portions of my life have been outside Rajasthan. But another more important reason of why Western India is that it's just that a significant proportion of maps, early modern maps, just come from Western India. They represent or are made in parts of Western India, which is present-day Rajasthan and Gujarat. So like I said, I will try to take you through how we interpret these maps by looking at one of the maps that we're working on. So this is the map I chose to specifically work on and spend more time analyzing. And this was a map. So one second, I'll just give you all a copy of this map so that you can just look at it while and talk about it. Sorry for the folks online. You might not get a physical copy. Everyone has a copy, so you can just refer to it. Of course, it's not a very detailed print. It's just on 24 size sheets, but it will give you an idea of what I'm talking about, and you can just have a look at it while I'm talking about this. So first, what do we know about this map? And to be honest, there's not much that we know. The provenance, or like what was the ownership of the map. So about the provenance, we know that it was found in the City Palace Museum in Jaipur. And this museum, these are some photos from the museum that I took when I visited it last month. And this museum has the largest collection of indigenous early modern maps within India. And there is a catalog of the maps in this museum created by Dr. Chandramani Singh and Gopal Narayan Baura. And in that map, they've cataloged all of the maps that are there, and they've tried to give in details about as many maps as they can. And for this map, there's only one line. So there's the catalog number, and all it says is that this is a map showing Ajmer, Nagaur, Ahmedabad, Jodhpur, and Jaisalmer. And they've given the size, which is 109 into 152 centimeter. So apart from that, we don't know much from the catalog, at least from the City Palace Museum catalog. And what is the City Palace Museum? So the City Palace is the home of the Kachwaha Rajputs of Amer or Jaipur. And the Kachwahas were a prominent Rajput clan who ruled over the kingdom of Amer for hundreds of years. And some of the important rulers were Raja Bharmal Singh. So Raja Bharmal established ties with the Mughals through marriage of his daughter, who we know as Jodhabai. You might have heard of her in the movie Jodha Akbar, so on. So they established ties with the Mughals through marriage during Bharmal's time. And then there was Man Singh I, who was the highest Mansabdar under Emperor Akbar and Jahangir, and Raja Jai Singh I was again held the same post of one of the highest Mansabdars in the Mughal reign, and Ram Singh, Bishan Singh, and Savai Jai Singh II, who the city of Jaipur is named after. So what do we know about the production of maps, and why was this map maybe there in the City Palace Museum in the first place? So we know that the Mughals had their own karkhanas. Karkhanas are basically workshops where different items may be produced or stored. And they had karkhanas for all kinds of things. There would be the Sile Khana, which is a karkhana for weapons, and then there would be karkhanas for paintings. So the karkhana for paintings was known as the Surat Khana or Chitra Khana. And this is where the maps would often be made. So now we know that the Mughals and the Rajputs had a very close association with each other. So similar to how the Mughals had karkhanas, the Rajputs also had their own karkhanas. And this was in Jaipur. Jaipur has one of the most well-known Surat Khanas, but so did some of the smaller Rajput kingdoms. They had all had their own karkhanas. And these karkhanas also kept very detailed inventories of what was in them, with what came in from outside, what was gifted to the karkhanas, and or what was already there in which year, and what were the materials that might have been used to make these. So in the case of maps, we know that in the Jaipur Surat Khana, there were multiple different kinds of maps. So there were route maps, survey maps, there were religious cartographic maps such as Jain Pattas, and there were these Chadar with Rakhi putts, which is maps on cloth. So using the catalogue made by Chandramani Singh of the Jaipur Museum, of the maps in the Jaipur Museum, I made this graph which shows like how many maps are there attributed to certain periods in the history of this Surat Khana. And there we find that we see like the number of maps attributed to certain dates increasing in the mid 17th century and going really high up in the early 18th century. So they start increasing during Man Singh and Jai Singh's period, and they reach their zenith in the period of Raja Jai Singh II, who Jaipur is named after. And Jai Singh II is a very interesting person. He's very interested in astronomy, and he acquires all the different kinds of Sanskrit manuscripts that are related to astronomy before his time. So his library has all of those manuscripts. But other than collecting Sanskrit manuscripts, he also acquires and translates Persian and Arabic astronomical manuscripts. Then he learns about European astronomy through Portuguese Jesuits, and he builds large masonry observations for more accurate astronomical observations. So some of these you must have definitely heard about. The Jantar Mantars in Jaipur, Delhi, Ujjain were built by Jai Singh. So there is always there's this interface of astronomy with mapping, because cartography, especially to figure out position and scale, uses a lot of astronomical observations back in the day. And so this is the provenance of the map, or where does the map come from, and a little about what we know about it till now. And then if we try to answer how the map was made, or the material used in the map, about this specific map, we can so I should tell you that we only have we don't have a physical copy of this map. So I haven't seen this map physically. It's only a photograph through which I can answer all the questions that I'm trying to answer. And so to look at the how or the materiality of it through this photo, we can't really tell much. All we can tell is that this was probably, it looks like a map made on paper which was stuck on cloth behind it. But generally, about the materiality, we can know about what was generally used in the Surat Khana to make paintings and maps present in the Surat Khana, because they have kept records of the prices and procurements of all the materials that they bought for use there. And the Jama Kharch documents of the Karkhana included paper, cloth, pen, colors, inks, things like fastenings of album and such. And this could probably tell us what pigments were used to make the maps, what ink might have been used, what kinds of papers, what kind of cloth might have been used, and what were the techniques used to make this. So was the cloth sized generally for different paintings? What were the processes that the paper or the cloth underwent? How did they make pigments? Were they mineral pigments, natural pigments? These kinds of things we can try to generally get an idea of and see that do any of these match the maps that we're looking at. And this is mostly how much we know about this map just by looking at it and about finding from what we know about where it's from. We don't know like until we actually look at the map in detail, we don't know what is on the map. How has the positionality on this and the scale on the map been represented? And when was the map made? We have a general idea that this was probably in the 17th century, late 17th century, but we don't know about specific dates. And we also don't really know about why this map had been made. So to answer the how, when, and why, I will try to look at the what was on the map, because maybe that can help tell us what, how it was made, when it was made, and why it was made. So when we look at the map, we see there are towns, villages, and different locations marked on the map. So if you see here, this you will find on the, if you look at the map in a A4 size, so you'll see this river in the bottom of the map. Did everyone find a river? Okay, wait, I'll show. So if you orient it like this, there is a river at the bottom. This is the river. Yeah. So that's the river Sabarmati. And right above it is the city of Ahmedabad, which is this one here. And there's a couple of small towns or villages represented on its right. So that's one city. So you see that these cities have lots of buildings represented inside them, and there's this square in the center with a larger building inside it. And then what do I do? Sorry, 1 second, we have some problems. How do I do it? Not. And then, yeah. Yeah. And on the left here is the city of Udaipur, which is a hilly area. So you'll see that on the right of the map. You can try to find it. And then here is Chittor. Chittor is known for being on this like large cliff which is flat on the top. So this is Chittor represented on the bottom here. And here you have some smaller cities and towns. So here you see that for some places, it doesn't have any buildings. It's just two concentric circles with the name of the place in the center. And you can also notice how these two cities are represented in different fashions. So this, since Udaipur is on a hill, it's represented on a more 3D, in a more 3D way, while this is more flat. And Dr. Deepti, who is here, she talks a lot about how this representation and viewing from different angles happens in her book, and how this can be represented from different points of view. And yeah, that's Deepti's book. So if you want to have a look at it, it's a great book. And it talks a lot about Udaipur miniature paintings. So other than the towns and the cities, we also have some topographical and botanical details, such as here on the left, you have some borassus palm, which is found only near the Sabarmati River. And then there are trees which look a bit like fig trees, but we're not sure. But because of the branching structure, we assume that it could be fig trees. But the other trees in this map at least seem to be very generic, and we're not sure if it could represent like different species of trees. But the ones that stand out are the borassus palms and the fig looking like trees. And other than the botanical details, we have lakes, which are represented by these really squiggly like pattern, like very pretty patterns in these lines here. And then you have the Aravallis. So these, the cloud-like objects here on this map are the Aravalli Mountains. And then you have different routes going across the Aravallis, which are passes. And if you look at this painting, do you see any similarity in the map and this miniature painting here? Yeah, so the mountains are very cloud, like I think of them as like cloud-like structures, but there's a lot of similarity between the mountains in the miniature painting and those in the map. So which tells us that the people who made this map were probably aware of what was going on in these weren't people who just randomly thought, okay, we'll make a map one day. They were aware of the conventions that were used in general painting during that period. And which is why we see that there's this similarity between the conventions present in miniature paintings and also in objects in the map, such as these mountains. And other than the topographical details, we have cardinal directions. So the cardinal directions are on each corners of the map. So there is north, which is Uttar Disa, and then south, Dakhin Disa, and you have west and east. So this is how they've given us a way to orient ourselves. And we also have routes on the map, which is something that really stands out in this map. So for instance, here you can see this is a route from one city going somewhere to another city, but there's lots of, all the towns in between have also been named. And this is another city, Sojat, which has a lot of routes emanating out of it. And then you also have routes going across the Aravallis, which are passes across the Aravallis. So we'll look at these in more detail later, because this is just to get us familiar with the map. And the names of the places and all other annotations are given in both the Nastaliq script and the Devanagari script. So here, this is the Devanagari script, and above that is the Nastaliq script. So I thought here we can, because next what we want to do is we want to try to transliterate all of these names so that it's easier for us to work with it. So if we have these names in English, we can now compare like all of these place names to contemporary names and try to understand how many of these places still exist, what is the scale like. So it allows us to answer a lot of questions. So for that, we had to transliterate all of these places. And just to give you an idea of how that went, I thought it would be a nice exercise to try to read like one name from each of these places. So if someone understands Devanagari, you can try reading this line. Who knows how to read Devanagari? Okay, everyone, not with us.
I can recognize a va and a ha and a sa. That's right. That's the.
Suwan, Pos. Yeah. Any idea of what that?
No, what is it all?
Charcoals. Yeah. Right. Okay. So this one's relatively not that hard to read, right? Like it says Ra Jetran Su Va. Okay, it is not Barakos. It says Barakos. So it's saying the route to Jaitaran is 12 kos. Kos is a measure of distance that they used during that period. And the same thing is written in the Nastaliq script. It's not exactly the same, but it means the same. So And here it says Kaswa Sojat. So the ta is below. So Sojat is a place in Rajasthan. And here you have distances given, chart, course, so on. So now can we try reading this one? How about this one in the center here? Zoom in. I think it will blow it up even more. I can. Anyone online can try reading the one on the left. So. Is my mic even on online? Hello, Venkat, can you hear me? Yeah, okay.
We can hear you, but it's not clear what you're referring to
The
on the map.
picture on the left. So the picture on the left with the names in Devanagari and the one which seems more blurred out. So it is hard to read, is the idea. So what I wanted to represent is that, so since we don't have a physical copy of the map, some names which are clearer and we have clearer copies of are easier to read, and we can transliterate those and translate those. And but for these, it's much harder to do. So we had to like really focus and try to figure out what are the places in this place, and maybe because this place is here, then that's what it says. So it was a process, and some places I think we couldn't figure out. We left a question mark in the end. And so this was just to show you how hard it is to do the transliteration. But so yeah, here you see that each of the places had the Nastaliq name in the center, and then right next to that, usually there was a Devanagari name. So for instance, here it says Kos Do. So this is Samelu and this is Bagor, and Kos Do is the distance between them. So Samelu is a place, Bagor is a place, and so on. So this is Kos 1.5. And that's to Bahula. So Bagor to Bahula is 1.5 kos. And that we've already seen. So here you see that both Nastaliq and Devanagari are present, but in a lot of instances, we found that the Nastaliq portion of the text had more details than the Devanagari text. So that probably tells us that the Nastaliq came first, and Deepthi has written about this in her book, about this map in her book about Udaipur. And also Chandramani Singh says, the person who built the catalog, also says that given that this Nastaliq is present, like it gives us a lot more detail. It probably tells us that it came before the Devanagari, and it could have been built for Mughal court use and was translated by the Rajputs, or was translated for the Rajputs to read. Or they also, since the Rajputs were working with the Mughals, they might have written it both in Nastaliq and Devanagari. So after reading all of those place names, we made this map where we annotated all of the place names that we could find. And so now we knew, mostly I think we figured out 99% of the place names, and we marked them on the map. So now we have English versions of the places that were present on the map. So now it's a lot easier for us to locate where we are on like a modern day Google map, because we are more used to working with English names and such. So other than place names, there were also other annotations. So one of those was the distances. So each of the places, each of the routes had distances given on them. Not all routes have distances. So for instance, the route that you see here, there were no distances given between places. It just shows that there's a route, but there were no distances. But it also had other comments, which tell us a little more about the place. For instance, this text here, it says, Dev Suri Talav ki taraf, tera kos dharti vikat, which means from Dev Suri towards the lake, the distance is 13 kos, and dharti vikat means that it's a treacherous route. So the idea is that whoever is looking at this map, they should know that this route is treacherous, and if there's going by this route, it will be some hard work. And for instance, here it says Pipli so post 3.5, so 3.5. So we marked out all of these comments and different distances. And then I tried to basically mark all of these routes out using annotations in GIS, which makes it easier for us to just visually look at the map and figure out where these routes were, and also what were the distances between them. Because every time if you go and try to just read the distances and read the names of the places, and especially given that it's not so clear, it's not easy. So this makes work for me a lot easier. So once I'd marked out all the routes, then the idea was to try to figure out what are these routes, what is course, so, and how these routes might have been surveyed. And about surveying, so what is course, first of all? And we know from this is a text which talks about Akbar's trip to Kabul. And during that trip, he wanted the route that he's following to be measured so that later when embassies are sent to that location where he's going to, they know how far that place is. And in that, the text says that Akbar he ordered the road to be measured to find the distance, and the measurers used 10-foot rods. And using those, a distance of 200 times the 10-foot rods, called the kuro in Persian. So even in the maps, in our map that we saw, when we read the Persian text, we see it says kura, instead it doesn't say kos, it says do kura or kura do. And kos in the Indian language, which is equal to 2 miles. So this is an approximation. If we read Irfan Habib, he says that during the reigns of Akbar and Jahangir, a kuro was about 2 1/4 miles. This is 1/4 here. And under Shah Jahan, the length was increased to about 2.5 miles. So that gives us a value for what a kuro is. And we see this again also if we look at early survey maps of India. So this is a survey map from the route of FBS Wilder, which represents Udaipur and Jodhpur. And in this, the scale bar is given in, there are 3 types of scales given. One is in British miles to an inch, geographical miles, and courses of 2 1/4 miles each. So he uses what we saw was during Akbar and Jahangir's period, 2 1/4 miles. The course is a 2 1/4 miles, which is equal to 3.621 kilometers, because we think in kilometers, so it's easier for us to understand that. Yeah. So just talking about, since I'm talking about British surveyors, Colonel James Todd, who was a British officer, he was stationed in Rajputana and in the Malwa province in Madhya Pradesh. And from him, so he's written this really seminal book called Annals and Antiquities of Rajasthan, where he talks about his surveys that he did in the Rajputana kingdoms. And also it includes ethnographic work, especially on Rajput. He talks a lot about Rajput histories and genealogies and such. And so in that, he talks about these old Hindu maps. So he says that I have heard it affirmed that it was a custom of old Hindu governments to have measurements made of the roads from town to town, and that of Abu Mahatmya. This is a text which contains a notice of an instrument for that purpose. So, okay, he doesn't talk about maps directly, but he says that this measuring of roads between 2 towns was done, and there was an instrument for that purpose. So he goes on to say that the singular coincidence between lines measured by the perambulator is an instrument you walk along with, and it helps you calculate the distance of the path you walked. And the estimated distances of the natives is the best proof that the latter are deduced from some certain method than mere computation. So by natives, he means the people who were in that land in Rajputana, and he himself had 2 surveyors that he worked with, because he couldn't go to all the places he wanted to survey himself. He sent out survey parties, and they were usually 2 of his most famous surveyors, like the ones he appreciated the most, were Sheikh Abul Barakat and Madari Lal. He preferred Madari Lal over Abu Barakat, and he talks a lot about that in his book also. So now that I'm mapping out the route, we see more clearly that there's lots of short routes between different places, which are only two or it starts with one course. Some places are only one course. There's distances of two courses and three courses and so on. But here you see that the distance of one course seems longer in length than the distance of three courses, for instance, here. So that maybe tells us that, like, so if that is the case, does that mean they're not following very uniform scale? Is the scale differing over different spaces? Maybe for places where they know, which they are more familiar with, the distances are more accurate, while places which they're not familiar with, it's not so accurate, or they've just not bothered about scale. So we don't know that. And then there were also long routes. For instance, you have here the distance between Jodhpur and Pokhran, which is 40 course, which would be more than 100 kilometers if you calculate that. And then here is also Merta to Nagaur, which is 20 kilometers, and Nagaur to another smaller town, which is 35, not kilometers, sorry, courses, and 35 courses here. So we see both short and long routes, and we also see passes across the Aravalli. So once we've done the transliteration for places, for all the comments that were there on the map, the distances, and we've mapped the routes, this is what we get. So we get a lot of information that we can interpret and use to understand this map. And now so I will now look at this. So I will try to now understand what we saw on this map and see how that maps onto a contemporary modern map. And by doing that, what are the inferences that we can get about the older map? So for that, I took all of the locations that we translated on the old map, and I tried to find as many of them on a modern map of India. So I found most places I saw that I could find the names still remained more or less the same. There would be slight changes in spellings, but there were some places I couldn't find at all, and that could be maybe that place doesn't exist anymore. It could be that the name changed, and there needs to be a lot more digging to try to find what it was called earlier and so on. So, but it was just hard to find some places. So there were some places which were missing. And then I also tried to map the routes that I saw in the old map onto a modern map. And I could do that for most places. But for instance, here you see between Badgaon and Palanpur, there is no route. While on the original map, it is connected by another town in the center here. But since I couldn't find that town, I tried to look for it, but I couldn't find it. I couldn't connect this route here. But more or less, I tried to connect as much as I could. And these are the distances in course given on the original map. So this is the area this map covers. So this is the part of India. So Rajasthan, some parts of Gujarat, and yeah. And then what I did is I also tried to find the same distance in kilometers. So using GIS, what I did was I mapped straight line distances between each of those 2 points in kilometers. So on the right here in pink, you have the values in course, and on the left in blue are the values in kilometers. So now we get an idea of what the actual distance in kilometers is today compared to what is given in the old map. So now we want to try to figure out how consistent basically these distances are, how accurate these are. So to do that, this is the same. So to do that, I divided the kilometers by the course given on the old map. So that gives us the value of one course, basically, for each of these routes. And when you do that, you get these numbers here. So for instance, from Pokhran to Jodhpur, the value of one course would be 3.2 kilometers. This would be. And this changes across the map. And it's very interesting to look at where the value for this ratio is lower and where it's higher. Because if you look at a physical map instead of just a political map behind you, you see that where the Aravalli range exists, the values for course suddenly go really weird, and they're very high. So the idea, what I think we can interpret from this is that since we've taken the distance in kilometers in straight lines, this tells us that the methods that they used for surveying were probably not computations which were looking at straight line distance. Somebody probably actually walked those distances using an instrument like Todd says and measured these lines. And since paths across mountains are almost never straight, they got a number which was much higher than what we see as straight line distances. While the same distances in the plains, you see like much lower values for the values. So going back to what all we could figure out by looking at this map, we see that there are no latitude or longitude lines. So there is no evidence, like direct evidence of latitude and longitude being used, although the orientation is fairly accurate. So we can't completely rule out that to orient themselves on this map, they did not use lat long at all. And it's a route map which has important details about distance and sometimes even directionality. Directionality, because if you looked at the text in between, it says Sojat se Jaitaran Ra Das Pos, which means from Sojat to Jaitaran. So that could imply some kind of a directionality, or it could be post 3 towards a lake. So 3 posts towards such and such lake. And just by looking at how the map was made and the spatiality of it, the influence from the miniature paintings and so on, we can guess that there were different kinds of expertise required to make this map. And there was some kind of information sharing that was probably going on between painters and surveyors and stuff. And we see the opposite also happening again in paintings in Udaipur, where some paintings have a lot of spatiality to them. And Deepti's spoken a lot about this. And basically, we know that the opposite is happening in Udaipur, and we can see this. Here also, we probably see that these map makers are probably painters themselves, or working with painters and surveyors also, because they need to know how this map. And they probably use specialized instruments for measuring these distances between places. So now moving on to when this map was made, because we also don't have a very accurate reading of when this was made. So when we were annotating this map, you see that there is no political affiliation given on any of the places. So all of those places just had the names, that it was just the names. But from all of the places on this map, there is this one place called Asop, which was written as Asop Watan Surajmal. So, which means that you question yourself that why is this the only place which has some political entity related to it? And it's not like it's a big city, like it's this really small place which doesn't have any towns. It's just 2 concentric circles with this text in between. While Jodhpur is like a whole this is Jodhpur on the right. It's a big fort with big rocks, lots of botanical details, and so is Nagaur. But there is this place which has this name there. So this is how this says Asop Watan Surajmal. So of course, the next step was to try to figure out who is this person and why maybe is he there. And my first instinct was to just Google him, and there wasn't much information available. There was this one website about Rajputs of Asop, but I wasn't sure of the historical veracity of these websites. But still, from that website, it said that there was this Thakur Surajmal in Asop, and he reigned in Asop from 1658 to 1680. I'm putting a question mark because I'm not sure if this was the date. But digging deeper, I did find this text, which was called the Itihas of Asop. And it was written by this person called Pandit Ramkaran Asopa. And in that, I did find Surajmal. And the text basically has a list of all the rulers of Asop, the different lineages, and talks about each of their rules in a page or two. So now Surajmal, although I did find him, he has only half a page dedicated to him in this book, while all of the other rulers have at least 2 pages or 4 pages and so on. And Surajmal is the son of, so he says, Ye Nahar Khan ka jesht putra tha, which translates to he was the oldest son of Nahar Khan. And Nahar Khan has 10 pages to him, but Surajmal only has 2. So Nahar Khan was this very famous character who in this period, he was a vassal of the Marwar king of Jodhpur, Jaswant Singh, and he worked for him. So Thakur Surajmal, he was the oldest son of, so his real name was Pirthi Singh, but he got the name Nahar Khan, which translates to Tiger Khan. And there were like lots of tales about him in these 10 pages, one of which was about how he got this name. So apparently how he got this name is that the Emperor Shah Jahan, when he knew that, so Nahar Khan was known as the most prominent vassal of Jaswant Singh and the most strongest, and he was like the tiger of Jaswant Singh. And so just to test Jaswant Singh and also to shame him, he said that why don't you send Nahar Khan and make him fight a tiger of the Mughal court, which was a real tiger. So he went, Nahar Khan said, okay, I will do this. And he went to the court and there was a tiger there and he went into, so Todd writes that he took opium and he went into the enclosure where the tiger was kept. And he saw that the tiger had no weapons on him except his body. So he said, now I will also not use any weapons and I will fight him with my own hands. And so he goes on to do that. And the text says that the tiger looked at him, he turned around and just walked away. And so Nahar Khan says that a Rajput doesn't attack somebody towards their back. So he says that the tiger he understands and respects me and he's turned his back and goes away. So that's what Todd's version says. In Asub Ka Itihas, Nahar Khan kills him with his own hands. The tiger dies, which is what happens in this. So Nahar Khan is a famous person. Todd is writing about him. Shah Jahan knows him. And he's one of the strongest warriors in Jaswant Singh's kingdom. But Surajmal, not much. Why is he on this map then? So here it says he was Nahar Khan's Jesh Putra. Apparently, towards the end of his life, for the marriage of his daughter, Nahar Khan gave away all the material things that he owned for that marriage, the horses that he owned, the money that he had. So it says that because Surajmal was very wise and wise, he says, तथापि इसने अपनी बुद्धिमानी से अशोक की गद्दी पाकर ठिकाने को तरोताजा कर दिया. So he used his wiseness and he still made up for everything that Nahar Khan had left. And then there's only half a page about Thakur Surajmal. So I'll tell you what there is in the text. So the text says in 1658, we know that Nahar Khan was stabbed with the Katari and dies. And then it doesn't say so, but we assume that Thakur Surajmal then takes the seat of Aso. So 1658, the website is correct. So that matches with the text here. And then in 1666, there's nothing after that for a long while. And then in 1666, 67, the text says that Suraj went with his younger brother Jaith Singh to fight Shivaji along with Jaswant Singh under the reign of Aurangzeb. And in this, on behalf of the Mughals. So Jaswant Singh was working for Aurangzeb and Surajmal and his brother were working for Jaswant Singh. So Jaswant Singh was sent to the Deccan and they went with him. So it says that Surajmal isme kaam aaya, matlab isme he participated. But it doesn't say that Surajmal fought in it and he was very brave. Instead, it says that Jaith Singh, who was his younger brother, is the leader of this is Nahar Khanots, not Nahar Coats. So he's the leader of the Nahar Khanots and he dies in the battle. Nothing about Surajmal except that he participated. And then the next thing we hear about Surajmal is that in 1678 and 79, there's just a story about, it's not even about Surajmal. It says that Jaswant Singh passes away, and then the Rathore rebellion happens, and the Rathores, I'll tell you what the Rathore rebellion is. So in 1678, Jaswant Singh, who is the king of Marwar, he dies at Jamrud near Peshawar, which is very far away from his home territory. And he leaves no male heir. And the story behind that is also very interesting because what people believe is that his only heir, who was taking care of Marwar when he was in Jamrud, was called by Aurangzeb to his court, and he was gifted this robe as a gift by Aurangzeb. And when, after a few hours of wearing that robe, he passed away in a very agonist death. And the story is that it was a poisoned robe, and Aurangzeb had the intention of killing him. And what happened was he has no male heir now. But when he dies, there are two queens who are with him who are in Lahore now, who are pregnant. And what the Rathors now want is that those two children are born, and one of them dies a few days later. But there is another son, Ajit Singh, who survives. And the Rathors want him to succeed Jaswant Singh and take over the kingdom of Marwar. But Aurangzeb has this not such a good relationship with Jaswant Singh, because during the war of succession, Jaswant Singh sided with everybody except Aurangzeb. And so he doesn't trust Jaswant Singh at all. And he wants to take over Jodhpur. That's the idea. So Aurangzeb, when this whole crisis is happening, Aurangzeb tries to capture Ajit Singh in Delhi, but the Rathors, they fight Aurangzeb's soldiers, and they basically flee to Mewar. Mewar is the kingdom of Udaipur, and that's where they go. They basically take the child and run away from Delhi. So once that happens, Aurangzeb dispatches a Mughal army to occupy Jodhpur. And one of the divisions is commanded by Prince Muhammad Akbar, who is the son of Aurangzeb. And this uncertain succession and Mughal interference sparks the Rathod rebellion. And like I said, the Rathors form an alliance with the king of Udaipur, the Rana, and they fall back to the rugged Aravali's near Udaipur. And from there, they don't fight any pitched battle, they basically launch guerrilla attacks at the pursuing Mughal armies. And eventually this ends, it doesn't end, but what happens is that the Rajputs convince Prince Muhammad Akbar to rise against his father, but things are still tense till the death of Aurangzeb in 1707. So coming back again to Asop Ka Itihas. So now the Rathore rebellion happened. We don't see any of this. We don't hear about what Surajmal is doing during this. But in 80-81, we know that when Aurangzeb sends his army to Marwar, Surajmal participates in the Battle of Pushkar against the Mughal army, which was under Tahabur Khan, while Aurangzeb himself had pitched his tents in Ajmer. So that's it. That's the last we hear about Surajmal. And then the text goes on to the next king, the next Thakur of Asop, which is Kirat Singh. And it says that he is the son of Jait Singh, not of Surajmal. So we assume that sometime in between, after fighting the battle with Tahabur Khan here, Surajmal probably passes away, but it doesn't give us a date, and we don't know how he passes away. We don't know what he did after that. And then it also doesn't tell us when Kirat Singh takes the seat of Asop. So about Kirat Singh, it directly starts with the death of Aurangzeb in 1707. And in 1707, it says that Kirat Singh, so once Aurangzeb dies, Ajit Singh, who was the child who was taken away, and he's fought this guerrilla war, he stayed with the Ranas of Udaipur. He's grown up in Sirohi and Udaipur, the hills of the Aravlis. So this person, he's now older, and he wants to take back Jodhpur. So he lays a siege on Jodhpur. It is successful. And when he's trying to walk back into Jodhpur, Kirat Singh comes and tells him, you shouldn't do this without the permission of the Badshah. It's not a good thing to do. And all the other Rathors around him try to explain to him, this is your Swami. He is the one who your previous generations have worked under, and you should look up to him. You shouldn't stop him from entering Jodhpur. Let him go and take the seat. But the text says that he is trying to not let him go without the permission of the Badshah because he wants to save his mansab. So which tells us that he was a Mughal mansabdar. So at some point between Surajmal fighting against the Mughals in Pushkar here, and of course Nahar Khan himself was a Mughal, he worked for the Mughals too. But at some point, this lineage started working for the Mughals again, and this was probably after the Battle of 1680-81, when there was direct Mughal rule in the area of Marwar. And since Asop is near Merta and Jodhpur, there were Mughal. You can imagine that it would be hard for them to not come under the Mughal influence and work for them and oppose them from there. So this is all we know about Surajmal from this text, and we can't say much more about him. So when was this map made then? It's hard to get at an exact date, but if it's contemporary to Surajmal, that would mean that it was either made between 1658 to 1680, but then 1680 we're not sure of because we don't know when he dies. But the idea is that maybe the map was made when the Mughals were ruling Marwar, and maybe even Surajmal was the patron for the map. But of course, we can't be sure of all this without more details. But I'll go back to how there is some more information which can support this. So why was this map made? What was it used for? And why did they make it at all? So it could have been a military map. From this, so this is a text from Jadukar Sarkar's History of Aurangzeb. It talks about, this is him talking about Marwar, says that if such a province could be annexed to the imperial dominions, which is the Mughal dominions, or placed under a servile and dependent Raja, Mughal traders and Mughal armies would be able to pass easily from the capital to Western India and the Arabian Sea. Because in the Arabian Sea, there were different ports of Surat and Cambay where all goods came in, and then they moved along this route to Agra. And the proud lord of Udaipur would be taken in flank, and a long wedge of Muslim territory would be driven across Rajputana, leaving it into two isolated halves, which could be crushed in details. So this whole time, the kingdom of Mewar had the kingdom of Marwar on its flank. So it was protected from any Mughal attacks from that side. But now that the area of Marwar was taken over, this whole flank was left open to all kinds of attacks. And we know from accounts of the Rathore rebellion, in Manuchi's accounts of the Rathore rebellion, and from what Jadukar Sarkar writes about the Rathore rebellion, that these Mughal forces were hesitant to enter the narrow passes when this whole guerrilla war was happening. They were hesitant to enter narrow passes, fearing deadly ambushes in the labor terrain. And the difficult geography slows Mughal movements and unsettles their commanders. There is one story here which is about Aurangzeb himself going into the hills of the Aravlis to look for the Rana of Udaipur. And it says that he went into this pass in the Aravlis, and he lost his way and was stuck there. And he was surrounded by all sides by the Ranas of Udaipur. And basically that now he was really scared. And the story says that the Rana let him go because he wanted him to think that he's on his side and he's not really trying to cause him any harm. So now what Aurangzeb does is he goes back to Ajmer. He says, I'm not going into the Aravlis. How about you, my sons and generals, you go and find the Ranas. I will stay here and wait for you to be successful and come back. And they go, but they're smart and they're also very hesitant about going into the Aravlis. So they never really very directly push into the Aravlis. They're just spending time there and trying to find excuses to not go and follow these people into the Aravlis. So which tells us that these Aravlis were not a territory that the Mughals were very familiar with, and they were very hesitant to go and go into these places very directly. And that could be like a support for this being a military map, because we know that quite often before the Mughals attacked any location or they laid siege to a location, they would often get maps made of those locations. For instance, we know that when later on during Jai Singh II's reign, who was the Kachwa of Jaipur, he made maps of these Jat villages which they were supposed to take over. And this is also supported by, there is this other map in the collection of Jaipur, which is called the map of the Rana's territory. So this was much earlier in date. It's dated to the mid 17th century. And Chandramani Singh writes that this must have been when the Ranas of Udaipur were reinforcing their fort in Chittor. So the Mughals sent their army to keep that in check, because they didn't want any reinforcements to be made on Chittor fort. So that map was made during that period. So it's possible that this map could have been made before the campaign in Marwar by the Mughals. And then another reason this map could have been made was just these were merchant trade networks, and these could have just been merchant trade networks. And here again, Jadunath Sarkar writes about how this route is the shortest and easiest trade route from the Mughal capital to the rich manufacturing city of Ahmedabad, and the busy port of Cambay lay through its limits. And he says from Agra, the western road through the loyal state of Jaipur to the imperial city of Ajmer was safe and well frequented. And we see that this map starts right at Ajmer. So the portion between Agra and Ajmer isn't there, but it starts right at Ajmer on the right here. So this is, and it goes through Pali, Jalore, and to Ahmedabad, so here in the text also you will find the same places mentioned here, whereafter it crosses a gap in the Aravali barrier. There's a lot of these passes across the Aravalis, and ran level through the Marwar cities of Pali, Jalore to Ahmedabad. And this is also corroborated by the fact that if you look at the number of routes emanating from each of these sites, you see that Jodhpur and Sojat, which were known to be the main trade cities in Marwar, they are the centers of these routes too. So this is Jodhpur and Sojat. So here the size of the circle tells you how many routes are going in or out from that. So Jodhpur and Sojat were the largest circles, telling us that these were very important junctions. So from all of this, what do we know now? What we know about the provenance is that it was in the City Palace Museum, Jaipur, and about how we know a little about generally the documents made in the Surat Khanas or Karkhanas of these courts, and about what is on the map. We have figured out, we've translated all of the place names, we've translated the annotations, made the different comments made on the map. So we know what's written on the map and what kind of information it gives us. And we also made some annotations using GIS, which makes it easier for us to interpret all of the markings, routes, place names, and such on the map. About the positionality and the scale, we know that the route map, this is a route map with distance and also sometimes directionality given. And we can try to, we know now that it was probably made using some special equipment which was used to survey from Todd's writing and other. So when was it made? The only text we have which can maybe tell us when this was made is Surajmal Vatan Asop, so which probably gives us a date of late 17th century. And like I spoke about before, possibly early 1680s, just either before or during the Rathod Rebellion. And we can also try to get at the time from Rajsamand Lake. Rajsamand Lake, the construction, which is very clear on the map, it's right above Udaipur. The construction only started in around 1672 and 68 or 72, and basically it ended around 1675. So since the lake is on the map, it has to be after that period. And the fact that the Rathore rebellion dating, it's also supported by the Rana chief. The same theory could be applied because they wanted to go and check the Ranas. So this could have been a map which was again made to, before they went into a campaign in Mewar and Marwar, they probably would have mapped this place. And the mapping could have been done in a Mughal Karkhana by the Mughals, or also by in the Jaipur Karkhanas, because Jaipur's, we have to remember that they also worked for the Mughals in this time period. But there is not much about the relationship between Jaipur and Mewar and Marwar that I have read from this time. Yeah. Oh, yeah, this is the last slide. And that's it. So why they made it? It's either a military map or probably for military purposes or maybe for merchant purposes. So this is what we know, and what we don't know is about the provenance before it came to the City Palace Museum. So that we can try to get at by looking at the records of the Surat Khana, which are present at the Rajasthan State Archives in Bikaner, because we know that they kept a record of where maps came from, who they were gifted by, or when they were made, or when they started to exist in the Palace. And we've not seen this map in person, so a physical analysis of the map would tell us a lot more about the materiality of the map, what cloth it's made of, what paper it's made of, what were the pigments used, and such. And sometimes the Surat Khana also has records for specific items and how they were made, so maybe that is something we can try to get at also from the records. So what is on the map? We've not seen the verso of the map, the back of the map, because I've not seen the map physically, and I don't have a photo of the verso. And what we can also try to do is to compare this map to early British survey maps to try to look at if these are the same routes which persist even in the early 19th century when the British were doing their initial surveys. And about the positionality and scale, we can try to look at the records in the state archives, again, related to Jai Singh's interest in astronomy, or in general, the Rajputana interest in astronomy, and try to figure out what was the interface between this astronomy and map making. And we can look at texts like the Abu Matmya, which Todd mentions, to look at what specific instruments they were using to do these surveys. And for when it was made, so our soap has these chhatris for each of their kings. So going there and trying to figure out if there is a chhatri to Surajmal, and is there anything more written about him which can tell us about when he passed away, or any other information about him would be great. And we can also look at Mughal Mansabdar records, because we assume, because Kirat Singh was a Mansabdar, it's highly likely that Surajmal might have also been a Mansabdar, and there might be records of this in the Mughal records. And we can do detailed readings of other Marwar texts like Nancy Revigat and his Khyats, and there are other people also who are writing in Marwar during this period. So maybe he's mentioned in one of those. And to get at why we can do more, I want to read more about the Mughal campaigns in Mewar and Marwar, and also about a deeper look into trade routes. So this is part of, yeah, I can skip this slide. So this is just part of some, we are also looking at other maps as part of this. And these are some of the other maps. And I would like to thank Dr. Samira Sheikh and Dr. Sheikhi Chair, both of who sat with me for 4 hours to do the translations. And everyone at the archives, since we are the only ones here now. Thank you so much. You can see me sneaking and taking this picture. No.
We have time for 2 questions.
So,
Maybe more than 2. We can carry up the discussion.
Like anybody else's. Just
yeah.
Small application. I'm interested to know how your GIS annotation relates to that network analysis that you did with road sizes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This.
Yeah.
So you can basically annotate routes and points in line segments and points in GIS. So the line segments would be the routes and the points would be the places. And I don't know if it's analysis, but what you can get at is that you can see the number of lines emanating from a point and size the circle according to that. So in this case, since there are more lines going away from Jodhpur, the circle is much bigger, which tells us that Jodhpur is connected to by more routes from different places, and it's an important hub. So it basically tells you what are the hubs on these route maps. Yeah, so it's the same routes and places on that map mapped onto a contemporary modern map, and then I've done that. You could do the same on the older map too. Would give you a similar, like the same result.
Just curious to know more about the ways in which you did the analysis that it's not working. It's just the actual nitty-gritty of how you go about, because it's actually
Fascinating stuff. Yeah.
so but that is not question for them. Maybe a question for you, so we can make sure we.
Yeah, we can sit down. Online, if you have questions, I can hear you. I can't see the chat box, so you might have to. Oh, okay.
Thanks, Taksh. Nice work. Continuing with the previous question. In case if the measure of a course is well defined, going by other maps made in 1670s, 1680s, the Aravali stretching of a course makes sense, assuming the path was long enough. But I'd assume others have done measures of course and cost.
No, I haven't seen work which has looked at course across maps, but yes, the value of course it's not this specific value. Like we see even across different reigns, it changes. So during Akbar's period, it's 2.25, and then Shah Jahan changes it to 2.5. And then there is also this concept of an imperial course and a local course. So an imperial course would have a different value. For instance, 2.5 miles would be a course, but in different local, like there would also be different local values, regional values, which would differ from place to place. So I read this account where it says during Aurangzeb's period, the value for the course, the imperial course was 2.5, but the value for local course, which was used locally around most places in India, was 3.5 miles, which is quite different. Yeah, so it does change, but I haven't seen any work which actually compares these across different maps, which would be interesting to do. Yeah.
Nobody has worked on any 17th century maps. Yeah. All new. Is the intent to contextualize every map that you've annotated in the same way? Like you take this doctor on one map. So is the intent that every map that you have to do this kind of?
I guess it's to try to figure out how mapping was being done in this period. And I wanted to take you through how we generally go about that. Maybe, I don't know if we are planning to, like Samira and they're planning to go into details about some of these maps, but of course there are a lot of maps, so doing it would need a lot more people, a lot more resources and so on. But the idea is like and all the maps are very different, so it's hard to map how you're analyzing one map to another map, because this is a route map. Some other map might not have routes at all. The scale would be very off, they would be very warped. Some maps use lat long, even 17th century maps. So it's very different across maps. But generally, we can have like a framework to, okay, have you checked for this? If this isn't there, let's check for this. And so that's possible to have. But this is how one would go about looking at one map, is what I wanted to show today.
So I think like if actually both of these questions were like to the point that I think that is something that you could really it's to kind of show the stakes of doing this kind of work. That you're not necessarily that getting through that question of mapping techniques and mapping technologies and what were the measures or what was the priority, something that requires all kinds of methods, and this is, so I think it would make sense for you to both explain as well as write a little bit about what your method is and how in that sense, how that is yielding a certain kind of interpretation. Because that itself, since that hasn't been done, and as you're pointing out, that is something that must be done across maps.
Yeah.
When you do it across maps, then you come to that, okay, is there certain consistency or certain way that we can do that method, or actually what we find in two different maps tells us that our method for doing the GIS and using that also has to completely adapt based on how that map, what information is.
Yes.
So I think that is, if those questions are to the point for you to think through that.
I think when we do this, it also leads us to what to look for in the next textually. Yeah.
It forces you to see those areas.
And it would be great to look at this in like a physical copy, because like how when we went to go see another map in Baroda, we noticed so much more that we didn't notice in the
Yeah, so I
e-copy. But yeah,
will talk a lot
Yeah.
more, and from whatever when I saw it in physical copy, which is also long back home. It means I think we know that it's on paper, we know that it has the cloth backing. There isn't any inscription or anything on the verse, so
always.
that I can very
Yeah.
sure. But I think that is where, again, we talk more, but I think that is where perhaps like locating what you are doing in relationship to getting into the question of material history. To some extent, it is perhaps worth like talking about Sharika Mishra's work, because she goes to the Surat.
Yeah, a lot of this Surat Khana
Yeah,
is
from
taken
that
from
she
her.
gets all of the repair histories.
Yes.
And also tracks that the chiteras are going across, painting and maps. So, but what is done there is from that documentary evidence, she's trying to get into questions of how do we understand this mapping,
Yes.
Karkhan, but not necessarily from a material history analysis, right? So I think for you to look at then what is your method in terms of how you're coming to it, it's worth kind of situating that at one level by looking at repair histories and all of that documentation of the Karkhana that was there. She's getting us a material history.
Yeah.
At the same time, through working with GIS, you are getting into a material history in another way, even while the actual material map is not accessible.
Yeah.
Right? Because that analytical work with the pictorial, with the mapping lines, with the inscriptions is something that is not done in that material history by the
Right.
So it kind of allows you to situate that how this kind of GIS mapping can also be a way to get into the question of material, what is there on the map as well.
That's true. Yes.
So I think that's what we talk, but this is excellent for congratulations.
Very small suggestion.
Yes.
Like who will communicate what Saptari and Chandri is.
But then Chhatri, it's like a umbrella. Yeah, should I tell you? Yeah. So Chhatri is like it's like literally Chhatri means umbrella. So it looks like a Chhatri. It has a covering on the top and it's open on the sides usually, and it's to commemorate a person who has passed away. Even now we have Chhatris made with different parts of India who passed away, and it commemorates them. Sometimes it has text about when they were, like when they passed away, when they were born, about their achievements in life. So that's what a Chhatri is. So these Chhatris are, they're present in our soup for a lot of their windows. But we don't know if Surajmal was important enough or if this Chhatri still survives till now. That's something we have to. Mansabdar is under the Mughal administration, where recently it's a military and administrative unit where person could own a certain number of horses and would go fight for them. That might correct. Yeah. But yes, I should actually continue with them. Thanks. Yeah. I can't see the Zoom. Hold a second. Yeah. There's something more. I have to meet. Yeah, I think that's it. Thanks, Vinay and Venkat. Bye.
Thanks, guys. Bye.